Kids, aloha to all you subscribers and looky-loos, and especially all my little kids out there waiting for a Sunday story that is true. Another true story is coming your way. Okay, I was thinking, boy, what could I possibly tell as a true story this Sunday? Well, I just came across something just a few minutes ago that I said I've been thinking about for a long time. It was in the past episode, whatever one it was when I was at the Indian Spiritual Hot Springs nudist commune with people wanting to be breatharians, and they were celibate. This is a great combination, isn't it? I can't wait when I really get to that episode. But this is what I wanted to say when I was in that episode that I said a fellow Dr. Brown came rolling in on his Harley on sheep wool pillows with his wife. I guess she was a blonde, kind of a beautiful Viking chick that he pulled up. It was Dr. Ray Brown, the guy that is pretty well known, but yet probably a lot of people forgot about him. It was back in the 70s. He found stuff in Bimini, where Atlantis is coming up. All right. So the thumbnail this Sunday will be, kids, where is the big red ruby? See, nobody's talking about that. They're talking about, well, okay, let me tell you, let me start from the beginning. We're all 1976. We're all standing around, a bunch of us, in our birthday suits. And this guy pulls up on his Harley and says, "Kids, I have a story for you. Get your blanket and have a seat." And this was his story. It was Dr. Ray Brown. He came in from, I believe, San Diego, somewhere in California. And he said he had a story for us because he was a diver. That he said, this is a fantastic story, and I'm going to tell you what happened, which is he was on a boat, and he was in Bimini, I believe around the Berry Islands in Bimini, and he said that this is how it happened. They were searching for gold. They were treasure hunters, and they had found treasure in the past. Different boats had gold, and so he was a treasure hunter with 4 other people that were treasure hunters also. So who was ever in charge of the boat, he never said, but it was a nice boat. They were out searching for so long. They knew around Bimini that these are where the blocks are coming up, the roadway, that there's different feelings on whether it's really a road, was it all natural stone and all that, but the way you look at it and the way it goes out there, it looks like it's definitely steps of some sort from another time period, which Casey did say that it would be coming up. He predicted it in the 30s, and in 1968, that's when the big hoopla was going on, where Bimini had these big blocks out there. So I think that's what he said. That started his thinking of maybe there's something more out there. There was a lot of camera equipment. There was a lot of food. There was a lot of stuff. By the way, they were looking for weeks and weeks and weeks for this pyramid that they knew was out there, because they heard about planes going over and seeing the pyramid, and they had a pretty close idea of where this pyramid was. But for weeks and weeks, they couldn't find anything. The water was too murky. All of a sudden, there was a big storm. I believe that's when all their camera equipment and food was pretty much washed overboard. The next day, they wake up. This is what Dr. Brown said to us. He said, They looked over the railing. Lo and behold, there was a pyramid visible at the top of a pyramid in the water, and they got so excited that everybody in the boat put on their gear, put their masks on, and they dove off the boat. They dive off the boat, and they go down to the top. The pyramid, I believe he said, was at least 40, 50 feet, but it was buried. Only the top portion was pretty much showing, which was a blue lapis color, which, as we all know, lapis, Egyptian, they used it quite a bit everywhere. It has different properties as a mineral, and I'm not going to go there, but it's very important for telepathic things. So he goes down with the crew, and they're searching around the top of the pyramid, and somewhere they found this hole that they all go into. And there's different rooms, but he went into this one room, and apparently, for some reason, everything was illuminated. Everything was lit. There was no windows, but everything was lit inside. What he found was there was something in the ceiling that was coming down, some kind of rod, gold rod or whatever, he said, coming down. And then at the end of the rod was a ruby. And he tried moving the rod around. He couldn't do it. But when he got down, he saw the ruby. And that he did take the ruby. Now, under the ruby were these hands. They were, he said, some kind of metal. And it looked like they were charred. Like something happened, some sparks or something maybe. But in this hand was a crystal. And by that time, with all the energy that he had done, he was running out of air. So he had the ruby, and he skedaddled out of there. I guess the rest of the crew was running low on air too. They got out of there. They go to the surface, and the boat was still there, which is another point I wanted to make. He said normally someone stays on the boat. Not everybody just jumps off the boat. It wasn't anchored, but for some reason it was still where they left it. Because it could have been miles away. See that? Hindsight. You never jump off the boat, kids, unless somebody is staying behind on the boat. And that's what he mentioned. He kind of chuckled at that. He said it was amazing the boat was still there. So they get into the boat. He's got the ruby. And how'd that work after that? Pretty much the story goes, yes. I had to Google this because I wanted to get this straight for everybody. And you know what? I find there's some missing things in this story. Well, this is 1976. I'm told this story that he had found this ruby in 1970 because it was a big July storm that made way for the finding of the pyramid. Now, I came across a book in 1916, a book on Atlantis that was written in 1980. So, lo and behold, in one of the places in this book of Atlantis, Dr. Ray Brown comes up into the story. And the story is that that's right. In his story, when we were talking, he said he had to go back for that crystal that was in the hands. All right? Okay. Keep that on the back shelf. So that's all we got out of him at the Springs, that he was going to go back for that crystal. So as I read the book in 1916, that he went back in 1980 in the book, and he found the crystal in the hands. But there was some terrible thing happened to four of his divers. They drowned. So that wasn't very positive. But he did end up with the crystal. And then as I Google all this, Lo and behold, there was, you can probably still get it unless they take it off. There was Leonard Nimoy on Unexplained Mysteries, something like that, that Dr. Brown is in there with some kind of metal thing that on a pillow with this crystal that has pyramids in it. And this metal rod keeps the crystals pushing back the metal. You can find this or you don't, but that's how this crystal works, apparently. Now, as you look into this deeper in Google, you'll find that, well, he did retire, I believe, in Sedona, but he lived in Mesa, Dr. Ray Brown. And he made his transition in the 90s. So somewhere in the 2000s, another guy got a hold of Dr. Brown's crystal, which apparently had some negative energy to it or something, and he boiled it, and then he cracked it in 4 pieces, and I don't know why. If they would have just, there's different ways of working with crystals, and it's not to boil them, but that'll be another episode. The episode that we're talking about now is what happened to the red ruby. Nobody's mentioning the ruby. And because back when he was talking to us in '76, he says, "Oh, I got the ruby." Yeah, right. But he didn't have it on him then at the time. But as we know, though, if this is the story, the rod that came down that was gold or some metallic had the ruby at the bottom of it, and the hands were here with the globe. The ruby and the crystal had some kind of force going out that we know now that rubies were the first. The laser was used by the ruby. Now we use other different colored gems that we can make lasers with now, as everyone knows. But it's interesting that something was going on in Atlantis with a ruby and a crystal. That is a very unusual crystal, by the way. It has the people that have held it, not many, say it doesn't have the coldness of a crystal. It has the similarity of the same structure as that crystal skull that they found. That even the Smithsonian Institute says that it's 100% not man-made. Somebody with higher technology than we have now has made that crystal skull. So we do know that Atlantis is pretty much a non-topic. Nobody really wants to talk about it. Plato talked about it a couple thousand years ago. We're not even, well, I guess we're coming into the understanding of Atlantis. Because of, well, just the way, if you look at things, kids, you got 2 different spectrums of the planet, 2 different continents that have the same thing going on. To where, how did it happen? How did the Mayans have 365 days, and how did the Gregorian calendar have 365 days? By the way, Gregorian calendar came in the 1500s by Pope Gregory the 13th. I guess they changed it from the Caesar, the Julian calendar, because the Julian calendar was off by 11 minutes. So they had to change the calendar. But they still have 365 days to them, which are on 2 parts of the continent still using the same zodiac. Both the European and the Mayan have the same zodiac. That's rather interesting. Then we have jewelry and gold both being barter and trade. We have, I don't know, Columbus found the New World, and we have the elephant that is not supposed to be in America. It's in South America and Europe, but yet we find carvings in America of the elephant. We have the witch, the black cat, broom in Spain, and yet we still have pictures in America of these same caricatures. I just find it interesting that the pyramids, both in Mexico and Egypt, they have the identical architecture of being put together. Symmetry. They're a little different in structure as far as the pyramid goes, but it's the same mathematical numbers to put both these structures together. As I said in the past, I believe it was on the Kahuna episodes, where did the Atlanteans go? They went everywhere where there's big rocks. So that would correlate to where Atlantis was here, and some of their knowledge went out with them before they totally went down. I guess there's so many books on Atlantis, but if there was ever one that you would care to consider, you'd have to look up A Dweller on Two Planets. Yeah, it's also under the dividing of the way. It comes under two headings. It was done in 1888 by a fellow named Frederick Spencer Oliver. And it was through a channeling that he had by a fellow named Philo the Tibetan. Now, this used to be a mandatory thing in reading for colleges. I don't know if they're still doing it, but this book has a lot to do with Atlantis that might help somebody if you want to look into the daily life of the Atlanteans and what they did on a daily basis. Which is fascinating about this book that was written in 1888 is the stuff that was written we have now, but we did not have in 1888, which is quite interesting. Things that are flying in the air. And I believe somewhere in the book it had also said that the planes that they had also could submerge like submarines. I don't know if we have any of that yet. Do we have something that flies and still goes under the water? Maybe we do. Just haven't really heard about it publicly, probably. So we have that. We have the seeding. How did the redwoods occur? They were seeded by Atlanteans that came by with these ships that dropped the seeds, and that's how we got that. And then I believe the different vegetables and, well, let's see, corn. Corn came from Atlantis. I got to bring that up right now because it's been bothering me. You know the Indians, right? The Indians had corn. Where'd the corn come from? Well, it is written in Egypt's papyrus that Egypt had come to America even before the Vikings, okay? And if you can believe it or not, just put it on the back shelf as a possibility. In the papyrus that was discovered, the Egyptians that came over to America and met the Indians, they planted corn with the Indians, I believe for 2 seasons. And after that, they headed back home. And they did it that way. And that's how the Indians got their corn, by the way. I know everybody's saying, nah, well, is that true? Is that really true? Well, they still don't know where the corn came from, you know. They know that bananas were in South America. And how did, when Columbus came over to the Americas, was there banana plants over here too? I mean, there's that question. There's so many questions that nobody can answer. So I'm just saying, like, for instance, the Pyrenees in France, in the cave. It's something like 60 foot by 60 foot, 70 by 60 foot. The Pyrenees, these animals that they have on the wall that are supposedly from prehistoric 40,000 years ago. And then there's also some witches with black hats. I don't know. How did they get in there? You know, you got to ask. Well, this paint that these folks did back 40,000 years ago cannot be, they can't make the same paint. It's really impressive paint. Now, what we find, though, is up in the archaeology dig, the Raven archaeology dig up in the White Mountains, there's some caves up there that have the same kind of paint. They say it goes back 40,000 years, and it's pretty close to identical to the ones over in the Pyrenees. I just find that to be really interesting, that somebody who's been moving around here back 40,000 years ago when they're not supposed to. I mean, from what we get in our books in school, you would think we would get a little more updated. That's all. That's all I'm saying. I'm not putting any blame on anybody. I'm just saying maybe we can say now, you know, the Vikings were here first before Columbus. Obviously. But can we really say Egypt was here before the Vikings? I believe we can. Because there's an episode on giants. The episode on giants, I totally forgot about this important fact. The Indians, when they told me the story, I just couldn't believe it. There's a cave down there. Apparently, yeah, it was that guy Hubbard, not the other Hubbard, but this guy Hubbard from the Smithsonian Institute, that found the cave that had Viking things, also the Egyptian artifacts that were in there. And then somehow the cave just kind of caved in on purpose. And this guy Hubbard from the Smithsonian Institute, it was a pretty well-known guy at the time. He was in, after they found what they did down at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, he now was he was moved over somewhere in Nebraska back in the 1800s. And there wasn't much going on in Nebraska in the 1800s, so I don't know. I guess they just wanted to kind of keep it quiet about the stuff that they found at the bottom of the Grand Canyon that I heard through stories of the Indians back in 1977 that I thought was a lot of foofara. Yeah, giants. Egyptians. And then you find out, well, I had Googled later on that this guy Hubbard did find all that stuff. And now that I'm looking it up in Google, I can't find any of that stuff now. So it might be just a coincidence. But I'm just putting things out there, kids. There's a lot of stuff in history that has either been forgotten or been rearranged for some reason or another. And as they say, knowledge is power. And that's why I guess there's a lot of people that just don't want you to have any knowledge. But again, it's just a little too late now. Times are changing. Things are accelerating. Things are moving much quicker. Ask your parents. Yeah, things are moving a lot faster. Ask your grandparents. Yeah, things are moving a lot faster, it seems like. So there's an acceleration going on that you kids haven't really realized yet because, well, as you get more experience, you're going to even say, wow, it seems like it's going a lot faster now. It does. It moves that way. And again, I'm going to say, kids, you are the problem solvers that we need at this time to help further the information that is necessary, such as deciphering more of the Sanskrit and definitely the things that are being I guess we have stuff in the Dead Sea Scrolls that people still need to find how to decipher a lot of that. So that might be an avenue you might want to check in the future. So that was the only story I wanted to really tell you about, was Dr. Ray Brown coming in and telling us about his experience. Oh, I forgot. Perfect. Thank you. That was what I want. After he found the ruby, the big red ruby that nobody's talking about, he said that they were on the boat and they were going, I believe it was the next day, it was within hours, there was some kind of cloud. There was a cloud, a gray cloud that was up before. They entered a gray cloud. This is the important part that I almost forgot about. Oh my God, thank you so much. So they get into this gray cloud. And this is 1976, by the way. He's still from the time he was out of the pyramid, in the boat, into the gray cloud. He said everything was different. Before that, there was dolphins, there was birds. Now there's nothing but gray. There's no water hitting the boat. There's no sky. The sky is gone. There's nothing but gray. Gray everywhere around them. And it's quiet. Real quiet. And I guess that's when I had to ask a question. I asked a question. I said, well, doctor, did you have an oar? Did you have an oar? He said, yeah, we had an oar. I said, well, you didn't hear anything. You didn't hear any waves. Why didn't you take the oar and throw it over the boat? If you hear a splash. He says, nah, well, we really didn't think about any of that stuff. I said, oh, okay. And this is just me, Uncle Martin. I got to ask a question if I can. So the next question was, well, Dr. Brown, did you have a rope? Yeah, we had a rope. I said, well, why didn't you tie the rope around somebody, tie it off, and somebody jump off the boat and see what was down there? I'm sorry. It sounds funny now, but I don't know. That was a serious question I had for him. Do you know what his answer was? Do you know what he answered me as? You know what he said? He said, son, that was the last thing anybody wanted to do. He says, there was nothing you could see, nothing you could hear, and there was a feeling. He says, we were in the Bermuda Triangle, by the way. And he says, that feeling was not a pleasant, positive feeling. He says, what we wanted to do was, in fact, that's what we did. We all found a corner in the boat. We all went there and we just held ourselves in a fetal position until we came out of it, which they did. They came out of the gray fog, whatever it was, into the daylight again. And I just thought that was interesting that nobody wanted to, throw something over the boat to hear what was out there, or maybe get a string, something put around them and jump off, and you'd have the other part of the rope, right? I don't know. That was just a question that I had for him, and that was his answer. That's all. Dr. Ray Brown gave me that answer. The other theory was that the Bermuda Triangle is because when Atlantis went down, they did have crystals that were much bigger than the one that he did find, that had this magnetic power of repelling metals, and had a different feel about it than normal crystals. The idea is that this crystal, that when Atlantis went down, was not protected and was still being used apparently, and is still at the bottom of wherever it's at, and it's at a kilter to where it's giving off these energies to where, even to this day, ships and planes go into this thing and they don't come out. So that's the way it is. In theory, that's why the Bermuda Triangle is in that flux of state of maybe a different time zone, different. It's obviously gray, It's got to be gray. It's gray and quiet. And nobody wants to jump off a boat to find out what's down there, you know. So, I don't know. Maybe, yeah, whatever. So I just thought I'd give you that little story of Dr. Ray Brown when he showed up at the Indian Spiritual Hot Springs in 1976. So you can Google Dr. Ray Brown or the crystal, the Atlantean crystal, and you'll probably get some kind of information. But I couldn't find a doggone thing about that red ruby. Okay? So there's a red ruby somewhere out there that nobody's talking about. So if you do have any information on that, if you can get a hold of Uncle Martin to let me know how you feel about that. So until we see each other again next Sunday, I'll have another story, a true story for you. And until then, I gotta say, you're looking fantastically well. And until then, aloha and be well.